Aliens, Genocide. Chapter 8. When Grant closed his eyes, he could see Fisk's face grinning at him. But he was tired. So tired. He sat in a corner grave couch of the shuttle, dimmest part, telling himself he was safe. Telling himself it was okay, that he was in charge again. Rest. He needed some rest. He was alive. That was the important thing, he told himself. Miserable, but alive. Why had he ever gone out last night? He knew that he hadn't made the payments to Fisk. He knew that Fisk's temper got out of control sometimes. A mistake, a goof, a snafu. It wouldn't happen again, that was for sure. Of course, he had a few months to get the opportunity to high life it again. By then, hopefully the money due to Neopharm, and thus Grant Industries, and thus Grant himself, the financial entity in direst need, would have arrived. He'd just call his CEOs and order them to pay Fisk what they could of his bloody money. Deal with the whole disaster, weep with poor Mabel Planner's family, and make sure the insurance company paid off as though it had been on company time the girl had been shot. And above all, do what Grant was doing. Survive. He'd come damn near close to falling off the edge of that state last night. Even now, he wasn't quite sure how he'd done it. When those blasts had ripped through the booth and Mabel, some auxiliary mode in his musculature must have kicked in, because he'd never scrambled and dodged and ducked so well in his life. Some survival node in his brain must have clicked on as well. He'd done exactly the right thing, headed right on down to the dance floor. The wigglers and flailers there, doubtless thinking that the explosions above were part of the show, were still going at it to the heavy localized pounding. He hadn't dared to stop for the slightest moment. He dived to the exit, skipped his limo, sprinted blocks and blocks, even falling down a few times until he felt safe. Safe enough to hail a cab. And still, the chase had not been over. He'd spent most of the night hiding behind cans of garbage in an alley, waiting for one of his aides to come and pick him up. Then he directed him on a Toad's Wild ride to the launch port. And thus, he'd made it to the base, after a sleepless night, grateful to be alive. In the comparative safety of the shuttle, strapped in above the equivalent of thousands of tons of Gelig nuke, Daniel Grant shuddered at the thought. No, he didn't want to think about it. Not for a while, anyway. Sleep. Some blessed sleep. That was what he needed. Fisk's ugly mug or no. Hey there, that seat by you taken? Grant's eyes snapped open. There, looming over him, was a Nordic god. Thor with a haircut. Well, not exactly. He was big and strapping, with blonde hair and blue eyes, and a smile above his square-cut chin. He looked not only damned competent, but perfectly content in that state, and perfectly comfortable in the fatigues that snugly fit his muscular limbs and torso. Now this guy, thought Grant, looked like a leader. No, please be my guest. The blonde god secured a carry-all bag in a storage bin and then slid into the couch, not yet buckling himself in. Name's Hendrickson. Corporal Lars Hendrickson. They shook hands. You must be one of the Neopharm fellows. Yes, I'm Daniel Grant. I own Neopharm. Hendrickson did not react immediately. He took the information in thoughtfully. I had been told that you would not actually be on our expedition, Mr. Grant. A last-minute decision. Hendrickson assimilated this information and nodded, as though this were the most natural thing in the world. I see. Well, good, I say, with all respect. It's good to see bosses take a personal interest in important tasks. A slight bend of the mouth. Get their hands a little dirty, you know. Grant smiled the first time for what seemed like a millennia. Maybe I'm just trying to turn over a new leaf, Corporal Hendrickson. He closed his eyes, hoping to give the man a clue that he'd like a little privacy inside his own head. Maybe rest his bloodshot eyes. Hendrickson wasn't the clue-taking kind. This is a special mission, he said. I can feel it in my bones. 9 times out of 10, a group of Marines head out into space. All they come back with are handfuls of boredom. I've had some of that out here. Let me tell you. Soon as I got wind of this mission, though, special duty in telling a beachhead on the alien hive world, well, I just jumped at the chance. Jumped. Couldn't get your fill of bug duty on Earth? Hendricks shrugged. I've killed some bugs, Europe, mostly special services. That's probably why I got this gig, the experience. No, that's not it though, sir. You see, I've got this feeling that the human race is destined for great things in this universe. Destined. And I like to do my bit to make that possible. And I guess I'm vain enough to think I'm a talented enough guy to deal with this kind of situation. You know, the thing we got lined up for us. Grant expected an inner groan of cynicism to echo in his head. Instead, he found the words oddly striking a sympathetic chord within him. That's a compelling, homocentric view of the universe, soldier. Hendrickson nodded. Yes, sir. I'm sorry. I've had people tell me that men are just accidents in the scheme of things. I don't think so. Why? Because we're men. We stand for something, goddammit. We've got values and order and, hell, purpose to bring what amounts to a lot of godless space. Indeed. That kind of feeling would be a wonderful rabble-rouser. I mean, that would go a long way to heal the wounded spirit of humanity. I know, sir. I know, Hendricks nodded gravely. And that's why I'm here. Excellent. Well, you know, Corporal, I think we're going to have a lot of time to discuss pertinent applications of that philosophy while we're out on this mission. In the meantime, I think I'd like to take a little time to compose myself before the blast off of this shuttle. You know, for meditation. A little catnap, perhaps. Hendrickson looked over at Grant. Yes, you do look a little tired. How thoughtless of me. Please, close your eyes. Relax. Snooze. I have my own inner warrior's form of meditation. We shall meditate together. With that, the corporal's eyes trained onto the front of his couch and focused. Well, rest and meditation was even valuable to Big Boy here. He should have tried that tactic before. Oh well. He knew he'd have someone of interest to talk to on the mission. He just wished now he'd brought along one of his PR men to jot all these golden thoughts down. Grant let his heavy eyelids close. He found peace for perhaps 30 seconds before he heard the clamor of feet boarding the boat. Closets opening, packs being stored, voices jabbering among one another. Look, chum, I'm telling you, that was the way it was. The music was the soul of the beats. The hot, cool black music of the streets, man. That's where the screaming ice lava of the poetry came from to begin with. The voice was annoyingly adenoidal and high-pitched. Look, Jastro, I make one single comment the other day that I enjoyed reading the old free verse of the 20th century, and you think I'm talking about the beat poets. I'm talking about a number of writers, including William Carlos Williams. Grant cracked his weary eyelids. Couple of privates in fatigues and caps. White boy, black boy. White boy was the one carping on the literary and music themes. Unfortunate, but he could tune them out. Williams. But Williams was John the Baptist to Allen Ginsberg. Sorry, never heard of him. Howl? You read 20th century free verse and you've never read Howl? Well, come to think of it, perhaps I have. But I still don't see the connection between free verse poetry and jazz. Sheesh. Not just jazz, buds. Bebop. Here, let me show you. The conversation had become detached, as though Grant were listening to it through a tin can telephone as he drifted into exhausted sleep. Bling! High-pitched running hell for leather up some spidery octave. Bleed! Bleed! The sounds were fingernails, and Grant's brain had turned to chalkboard. He jumped up, awake and disoriented. He hit his head on a low overhang and flopped back onto the couch. Honk! 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 He looked over. Sitting on the edge of a grav couch was a black man wearing glasses and a grimace. His hands were over his ears. Opposite him was another bespectacled guy with a pocket protector face. His thin lips were clamped on a mouthpiece of a big baritone saxophone. Both had boot camp bodies, but faces innocent of the heart of war. Blat, blat, blat! Can't you hear it, Ellis? He said, unclamping. I have seen the finest minds of my generation. The natural force that was Corporal Hendrickson reared up like a vengeful statue. You guys want to give the rest of us in here some peace? His muscular hovering said it all. The salt and pepper twins blinked, flinching back. Gee, sorry, Corporal. Just playing a little Birdman. Hendrickson stood rock hard. Well, I'm clipping your wings. This is not a place for that thing. Now over your head? Maybe. Ellis looked as though he agreed, but Jastro got a hurt little boy expression on his face as he put his musical instrument away in its case. I could use a few Z's anyway, Jazz, said Ellis. Yeah, maybe you're right. We'll continue this conversation later though, huh? Whatever, the man sounded resigned. Hendrickson bent over Grant. You okay, sir? Sure. My ears are still ringing and I'm wide awake, but I'm okay. We got a good 15 before formal boarding, so maybe you should use them. I'll try, Corporal. Believe me, I'll try. Hendrickson shot one more warning look at the newly arrived duo and then resumed his grav couch. Grant found Ellis and Jastro peering at him curiously, obviously wondering who he was. Grant could feel it, even through his closed eyelids. Excuse me, are you? The name's Grant. I'm the reason you're on this mission. But do you mind if we meet formally later? I'm trying to get a little rest. Oh, sure, sir. Yeah, right. We'll be real quiet. Whisper. Sheesh. That's Daniel Grant, man. And you had to squeal that sax in his ear? How could I know? I didn't even see him. The whispers died into uneasy silence, and once again, Grant found himself slipping into an uneasy coma, which ended all too soon. He'd been having a dream about his parents. and he hated to dream about his parents, so it was just as well. Still, it was all a little annoying. The clump of steps didn't wake him. He barely heard it. Background noise. The shifting of bags. The snap of storage cases. No problem. However, when a body fell directly onto him, that woke him up. "Oomph," he said. Oh dear. Damn floor. All these knobs and braces. Sorry." That the person was prominently female mitigated the hurt and shock somewhat, and not just because of the softer bits. She looked good, and she smelled good, even in fatigues. She was a busty brunette, with hair about as long as the Marines would let you wear it if you weren't male, and rich dark eyes that now looked thoroughly repentant. "That's all right," said Grant, flashing on the immediate lady smile. "I was hoping to get some rest before takeoff, but these things happen." She pushed herself off him with ease and a great deal more grace than she'd shown in tripping onto him. "I do better in Foxgrove, for some reason. And Nullgrove? I'm a swan," she shrugged. "I'm just a space babe, that's all there is to it. And I'll be glad to lift off this." She batted those splendid doe eyes. "Say, haven't I seen you? My God! You're Daniel Grant, the big tycoon. I've seen you on the vids." "The one and only." "You look awful. I guess you could use some rest." She hobbled over to an empty Grove couch, and Grant, despite his wariness, was unable to take his attention off her delightfully swiveling hips. She turned. "I'd heard you were somewhere behind this mission. I didn't think I'd get to really meet you, though." "Well, get used to it, Private," said Hendrickson. "He's coming along with us for the voyage." "No kidding. Well, isn't that news?" She swiveled back over and unconsciously smothering her hair and gave him her hand in a markedly breathier delivery. "My name is Edie Mahoney, private first class, but I'm still young and I really think I have quite a bright future with the Colonial Marines." Grant felt a little nonplussed and couldn't help automatically turning on a charm and wondering at the same time what this particular woman was doing in the Marines, and on this mission in particular. As he studied her, though, he got an impression of strength beneath the apparent ditziness. The oh gosh business was just an act. Beneath it, Grant could tell was strength, and it turned him on. It challenged him. "You have an interest in xenodevelopment, then?" said Grant. "The bugs? Oh, no." She shook her head, shuddered. "Hate 'em. But then who doesn't? I can see your question coming. What's a nice girl doing in a place like this?" She shrugged. "I'm just a space natural, I guess, Mr. Grant. I wasn't fooling you, and on top of that, I'm a tactical weapons specialist." "Weapons specialist?" "Yes, sir. Top scores." A mischievous playfulness shaded her voice. "I'm just glad you weren't carrying any grenades when you fell over me." "Oh, yes, of course, Mr. Grant. I really am sorry. And it's such a surprise. Maybe this mission isn't going to be such a grim business after all." "I certainly hope not. Now, Private Mahoney, I hope you'll come to my cabin sometime for drinks, and we'll have a nice long chat. In the meantime, my sanity could really use a little rest before it gets rattled by takeoff." Of course, Mr. Grant. Sir, I'll just hop onto a couch over here and leave you alone. And she did a double take. Drinks? Did you say drinks with the tycoon? Of course, Mr. Grant. I'd love to. I'm a regular media hound and watch you all the time. I even bought that unauthorized paperback about you. Is it true that your wife divorced you when she found you in your marriage bed with 4 naked women? Grant chuckled mischievously. And a parrot. Don't forget the parrot, Private Mahoney. He was pleased the legend lingered. The starstruck private shook her head and rapturously wandered back to her couch. Was it an act? He didn't know, and he didn't care. Drinks with an attractive private who would probably be disappointed if he didn't make a pass at her. After that tragic debacle last night, he was hardly in the mood for romance right now. But weeks into a space cruise with a bunch of scientists and hardened soldiers, the dominant Grant hormones would doubtless trot themselves out into quest and conquer mode. A willing female partner with the requisite assets was something that cheered him immensely. Now, though, to sleep for just a brief sweet moment. Grant let his head flop down into the cushion, gratified at the silence that the cabin had cloaked itself in. Respectful silence. This wasn't so bad, shipping out on a boat, heading light years away from Earth, with a bunch of scientists and Marines. It was his mission, after all, and he seemed to be getting the appropriate obedience from his people. This was good. This was very good. A kind of calm descended upon Daniel Grant. His knotted muscles unwound, and a sense of control of his environment began to knit itself around him. Yes, perhaps it would work out for the best that he was coming along to supervise, to oversee. No, to control. The boys in the office knew well enough how he ran things by now. They could do exactly what he would do, whatever the situation. He didn't have to be around. Instead, he should be doing exactly what he was doing. Heading for parts unknown, spreading his influence, his dominion. Daniel Grant, a great man destined for the stars. The cadences of his self-congratulations lullabied him into that blessed, relaxed land just short of slumber, where not even his mother was waiting to natter at him. Ah, sweet, gentle peace. Wonk! Wonk! The klaxon rang like hell's own trumpet. That's the fire alarm, cried Jastrow. Shit, something's wrong with the shuttle. We gotta get out of here, Mr. Grant. Please, murmured Grant. Just let me lie here a while. I'll die if need be. Just let me sleep. No can do, Mr. G. Grant felt himself being pulled up out of the couch and physically carried down the ramp. The cooler air outside was like a slap across the chops. He blinked, felt himself being jounced, and then suddenly stopped still. Let me down, he demanded. Do what the man says, turkey. Now. Hendrickson dropped him onto hard sheet-crete. Ow! Groggily, he scrambled up to his feet and found himself staring into the bores of 10mm blasters. Connected to those blasters were Colonel Alex Kozlowski and a group of Marines, travel sacks at their backs. Belay arms, said Kozlowski, striding up to them, arms on hips. If we were a group of bugs, you dopes would be bug food now. Emergencies demand emergency measures. A toothpick stuck out from the side of her mouth. She worked it all the way to the other side of a scowl. "Isn't that right, soldiers?" The Marines, who somewhere in the midst of all this had managed to affect uncomfortable poses of attention, immediately responded, "Yes, sir." Kozlowski worked the toothpick. "Besides, I haven't assigned seats yet, have I?" "No, sir." Kozlowski walked over to Grant and stooped down beside him. "Welcome to your mission, Mr. Grant." She spat the toothpick. It stuck into the loose fabric of his pants. "Welcome to my command." Grant sighed and closed his eyes again. This sheetcrete was actually rather comfortable. Chapter 9. Darkness. Darkness and dreams. Dream logic tangled in its own shreds and chips of reality and magic. For 6 weeks, Daniel Grant dreamed or didn't dream. But in the overpowering darkness, the dreams were all he knew. Mobius strips of dreams, jump cuts, swirls of victory and laughter and glory, the depths of the past, into secret and overpowering fears. Mostly, though, it seemed a short sleep, for the dreams were only brief releases of hypersleep to allow brain function and REM. In the glass case cubicle, embedded like a fly in amber, when the mechanism and gas mixed slowly began to gently pry him from his slumber, Daniel Grant only vaguely sensed the springing of the lock mechanism of his case. He clung to his dreams, clung to the darkness, a sleeper drunk on the sleep. "Mr. Grant?" A gentle female voice. Whose? It was sweet and kind and understanding. The kind of voice his ex-wife used to use in their early love, when he gave himself only to her. She seemed very real now, very much a part of reality in this darkness. "Daniel?" Martha. He'd been dating a lot back then, back in the halcyon days of Neofarm, when he'd first bought it and was working on the beginnings of his empire. She was a model his ad company had hired for commercials. He'd swooped down and never come back up. Not for a long time, anyway. Still, to this day, he was not sure why there had been others years down the road. Old bad habits? Part of the lifestyle he'd loved? Pure stoking of an overblown ego? He wasn't sure, and he wasn't troubled about it, except for moments like these, upon waking, when he doubted himself and when he felt vulnerable. "It's time to wake up, Mr. Grant." Wake up? Where was he? "We've got a lot to do." That voice, it certainly wasn't Martha's. He realized that now. "So hop to it." It was a hard voice now, a voice used to being obeyed. Grant realized that he was cold. He felt quite naked, shivering. He raised himself. He pried open his eyes. Peripherally, he saw the overhanging cables and cold metal of the hypersleep chamber. In front of him, crouching, was a good 8 feet worth of talons, bony notched spars, and open, angry jaws. An alien! Ah! He cringed. Then he scrabbled back, instinctively throwing up his arms in a helpless gesture to protect him from this, the deadliest creature in the known universe. Even as he squirmed, trying to grapple over the side of his hypersleep cubicle, what shreds of his rational mind that still operated realized something. The thing wasn't moving. It was just hovering there, a few feet away. And come to think of it, couldn't he barely see a bulkhead through the murky black of its articulated body? A shudder, a zwip of light passed through it. It wasn't real. It was a... From the left, a woman in khaki fatigue stepped, holding a modular control unit. Colonel Kozlowski. The beast before him was just a hologram. Thought you might need to get your juices flowing. She tapped the control and moved the hologram away. Welcome to the USS Razia, Phase 2. God damn you, Colonel. You want to be part of the gang, don't you, Grant? Just consider this a very mild hazing. You're a member of the fraternity now. He wasn't groggy at all. The adrenaline had managed to kick weeks' worth of sleep dirt out of his head. Still, his heart was racing, and he was damned angry. And what with only a pair of briefs between himself and nakedness, damn near naked. One of 10 that spiraled around a central control and supply center. All the Duraplast casings were lifted now, like translucent insect wings. They had obviously let him snooze a while longer than normal. All the other cubicles were empty. Why am I the last to wake? He said, getting up and out of the thing, steadying himself on the side. You seemed real tired when we left, Grant. We all thought you could use a little extra sleep. How far are we from our destination? The gravitonic engines are cut off. We've got to use regular impulse engines to cruise among the planets. We'll be in orbit around the hive world in 4 days. She smiled. Are you ready for some action, Mr. Grant? It would appear I've already gotten some, Colonel. What? From Black Fang here? She smiled. Just a training hologram. No reason to be embarrassed. Some younger recruits have soiled their shivvies because of Black Fang. Looks like you pretty much did okay. Grant snorted. You have quite a warped sense of humor, Kozlowski. I guess we're going to have to talk about that and some other things in a few hours. Right now, I'd like to get some pants on. Too bad. You look so cute that way. She started walking away. Come, boy, come. Fun's over. We've got some work to do. The hollow projection ghosted along beside her as she walked away toward wherever. Grant shuddered. He took a deep breath, got his bearings, and headed off in the direction of the locker room where he'd left his clothing. In the few days aboard the USS Razia, before he was tucked away in hypersleep, Daniel Grant had very little time to familiarize himself with the full extent of this very large ship. He'd spent some time overseeing the operations of his scientists, and he'd spent time getting some natural sleep. That was about it. However, he did make sure he remembered where he put his clothes. He wasn't crazy about the immense and metallic coldness of the ship. The liner he'd taken from his home planet had at least catered to some human amenities. It gave some feeling of warmth and sociability. Here, aboard the Razia, it was just a pure case of military utilitarianism. There was about as much decor inside the ship as on the outside. All in all, Grant was just as happy to snore the time away. What the hell was going on back on Earth now, he wondered. He'd warned his officers to stay inside, to hire security, and to reinforce measures. He'd even had them tender a small payment to Fisk's company. Nonetheless, he couldn't help but wonder. Still, whatever was going on, There was absolutely nothing he could do out here. Light years distant in some godforsaken quadrant of the half-known galaxy. The locker room was down a narrow corridor. Showers, toilets, benches. It looked, smelled, tasted, felt like something out of his high school sports heroes days. Funky, but somehow homey, oddly comforting. A tall blond man was in the corner, buckling the belt of his pants. Oddly enough, he was wearing dark glasses. They made him look more like the MacArthur School of Officer than a corporal. "Hendrickson? You just got out of code sleep too?" The corporal turned and looked at him. "Early this morning, just finished exercising, sir." "Just kicked my butt out of bed now. Wonder why they kept me down so long." "Maybe they just wanted things spick and span for you, sir." "You have a first name?" "As I told you before, sir, it's Lars." "Oh, right. That's it, Lars. Tell you what, you can call me Dan." The corporal nodded. "Thanks, Dan." Grant found his locker, racked his brain. His memory coughed up the combination. He twirled the dial back and forth. The lock snapped open. Inside were the civvy scientist grays they'd provided him with, since he hadn't brought along any of his own clothes, and the duds he'd come in with were pretty shredded. He put his pants on. "You know," said the corporal, "times like this make me wish I could pop a tab or two of that Xeno-zip you make. Unfortunately, tests have determined the chances are pretty good I'd go berserk even on the regular stuff. Damned skittish metabolism." "Oh, well," said Grant paternally. "I'm sure you're a damn fine soldier without it." He grew thoughtful. "I'll tell you, Lars, you must be pretty sick of that colonel of yours." "Colonel Kalowski, our commanding officer?" "She had a bug hollow waiting for me when I woke up." "No kidding. She must like you then." "Like me? Scared the hell out of me. Said it was some sort of hazing." "Tough. She's pretty tough, all right, the colonel is." Grant was surprised. "Come on. We're friends. You don't have to pull that loyalty crap with me. Tell me the truth. You've hated her for months, right?" In a "we men gotta stick together" tone. Hendrickson's face was strangely immobile. Behind those shades, his eyes were unreadable. "Mr. Grant, I guess you could say I feel like I've taken you under my wing. You don't know much about the military, and here you're on a military craft. There are things you have to understand about the military, and I guess it's not that much different from business life, maybe even simpler." Grant smiled. "Right. I knew we could be chums." He continued, velcroing his suit. "Damn thing, it sure as hell chafed. I'm a corporal. I haven't been in the Colonial Marine Corps that long, but I have previous military experience." "Exterminating bugs?" "That's not all the military does in this universe, Mr. Grant." "Sorry, Dan. Sir," he sighed. "Whatever. At any rate, my point is that it's dog eat dog here. Domination, but in a codified, respectful fashion. I've only served under the colonel since she called me from the ranks to be on this mission. She's earned my respect." "Oh. But she seems to have some kind of chip on her shoulder. Think she's just trying to make up for not having something between her legs?" "Like I said, Dan, you've got some things to learn. There are codes and games, just like everything in life. You learn the ropes. He shrugged. Maybe these little attitude stints. Well, I guess you pulled a few in your time at Grant Industries. Daniel Grant considered. I suppose I have, in my own charming way. Good point. The colonel is totally in command, and she treats everyone as an equal. And if she chooses to dump a little extra shit on your ears, a brusque shrug. Well then, like I said, Dan, she must like you. Grant thought about that a moment. Fair enough, Hendrickson. That doesn't mean I have to like her, does it? Hendrickson put a hand on his new friend's shoulder. Any woman ever treat you like this before? Grant considered. Yes, my wife. And what did you do about it? I divorced the bitch. Hendrickson smiled. Well, you'll have to marry the colonel to do that. I reckon the captain of the ships got the legal right to do that. Marry Hendrickson. I wonder who's got the more warped sense of humor, you or me. From what you tell me, sounds like the colonel does. I watch for that little hollow trick. She hasn't done that number on me yet. She must not like you, Hendrickson. No, I guess not. The corporal gave a farewell nod and started leaving the locker room. You're a lucky man, Lars. We'll see, Dan. We'll see. The big man was gone. Grant sighed. He velcroed his ship shoes and made a pit stop at the head. Next stop, his scientists and his little secret project that should make him feel back in the saddle again.